It was 4 sentences long. That was all she thought I deserved after 8 years of marriage, a shared mortgage, 2 miscarriages, and every grilled cheese I'd made for her when she said work drained her. 4 sentences. Neatly written on stationery from the wedding gift said her cousin had given us, monogrammed and cream-colored. Her cursive was still annoyingly graceful, each loop and stroke perfectly measured, like even in the act of breaking my life apart, she needed control. The note sat on the kitchen island, held down by the back door key we'd argued about a dozen times. Just hang it by the hook, I'd told her. I'll forget, she always said. Funny. She remembered now. It read, Grayson, I need something different. I need to feel alive again. Don't look for me. Tessa. I stood there in the kitchen, the sun creeping in through the blinds like it didn't know how to be ashamed of what it was shining on. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. Half a protein bar wrapper left on the counter. It wasn't a dramatic exit. There were no thrown suitcases, no midnight yelling, no shattered glass or slammed doors. Just silence, and that note. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, clean, deliberate. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't scream into a pillow or replay every moment to find a crack. I grabbed my phone and called Miles Chun, a college friend turned divorce attorney, brilliant, ruthless, loyal. He answered on the second ring. Grayson? What's up, man? I don't know what my voice sounded like, but he got serious fast. Send me everything. All bank info. Emails. The lease. Anything joint. I'll start the process. After that, I moved like a machine. I froze our joint accounts, left her enough in her personal savings to survive, but I made sure she couldn't drag me into whatever fantasy she thought was waiting for her. I changed every password. Pulled my name off anything that could tether me to her whims. And then, I booked the hiking trip I'd always talked about. The one to Glacier Point. The one she called masochistic nonsense every time I brought it up. I don't get it, she used to say, eyes already on her phone. You want to climb for hours just to stare at more rocks? Yes. Yes, I did. Because rocks don't lie to your face for 2 years. They don't smile while they're planning an exit. They don't leave notes. I packed light, just a few essentials and gear I'd been accumulating over the years. I had a fresh pair of boots, a new compass, and something I hadn't felt in months, clarity. I left the note where it was, didn't even move the key. It could sit there like a tombstone for what we had. When I closed the front door behind me, I didn't slam it. I locked it gently, like sealing something in a vault. The drive north was quiet. No music. No podcasts. Just the hum of the tires and my thoughts looping around the absurdity of it all. 8 years. One stupid note. I stopped at a gas station halfway up and bought trail mix, a gallon of water, and a pair of sunglasses because I didn't want strangers seeing the crack in me. I didn't cry. I wasn't numb either. I was just empty, like she'd vacuumed something out of me and took it with her. But I wasn't going to chase her. She wanted freedom? I was about to show her what silence and structure could really look like. I got to the trailhead just after sunrise. The kind of morning where the sky looks like it's been scrubbed clean. Crisp air. A faint smell of pine and promise. I checked in with the ranger station, signed the logbook like a man clocking into his own rebuild, and started walking. The trail was moderate, steep in some places, but not unmanageable. My legs burned. My breath came fast. But with each step, the clutter in my head fell behind me. No messages. No explanations. No timelines. Just me, the sound of boots on gravel, and the whisper of wind through the branches. Every mile I climbed felt like sanding away the version of myself that waited for her to come home. The guy who cleaned the house and reheated takeout and called it dinner. The man who let her edit his dreams down to things that fit in her schedule. That man wasn't coming back. Not this time. On the second night, I made camp under a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow valley. I cooked a simple meal, just beans and rice over a campfire, and stared up at the stars. No light pollution. No notifications. Just raw silence. The kind that doesn't demand anything. I reached into my bag and pulled out the leather-bound notebook I used to write in before everything became digital. I opened to a blank page and wrote 5 words. She left. I remained standing. When I finished, I closed the notebook and slid it back into my pack. I didn't feel healed. Not yet. But I felt anchored. And that was something. By the time I hiked back to the base 3 days later, my legs were screaming and my face was sunburned. But I walked differently, head high, back straight. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was awake. Tessa wanted to feel alive again. She'd stolen that from me for years without asking. Now it was mine to reclaim, and I wouldn't waste it. When I got home, the note was still on the counter. I didn't read it again. I folded it once, clean and sharp, and dropped it into the shredder. Let her keep the words. I'd keep the silence. 3 days in the mountains had stripped everything unnecessary from me. My legs still ached, raw reminders of the elevation gain, the switchbacks, the moments I wanted to quit but didn't. That first night back in civilization, I stood under the hot spray of my shower for so long that the mirror fogged and the water began to lose heat. But I didn't step out. I needed the grime gone, not just the sweat or the trail dust, but the mental film left behind by years of quietly eroding myself to accommodate Tessa. I didn't turn the phone on right away. I made tea first, sat on the couch, watched the sun dip behind the skyline outside my apartment window, the glass tinted gold, and everything too quiet to be real. I didn't miss her. I missed the version of myself I used to be before I let her dictate the pace and shape of our life. When I finally powered the phone on, the buzz didn't stop. It vibrated like it had something to say. First, a string of missed calls. Then messages. Group texts. Her friends. The ones who used to smile too tightly at dinner parties and repost our anniversary photos like they had any stake in our lives. Hey, Grayson, have you heard from Tessa? We're worried. We saw something weird on her story. Is everything okay? Can you call us? And then, of course, the one that wasn't concerned. Just annoyed. Tessa, why isn't my card working? That was her first message to me. Not, where are you? Or can we talk? Just pure entitlement. I imagined her in some boutique hotel lobby, trying to buy brunch or heels or forgiveness with a card that no longer worked. I let the message sit. Then another one came in. Did you do something to our account? This isn't funny. I didn't respond. I let her words pile up like trash bags left on the curb. Each message showed me exactly who she was when the filters dropped. Not a partner. Not a woman trying to reconcile. Just a person who thought she could disappear from a life she helped build and then return like nothing had happened when it didn't suit her anymore. On the fourth buzz, I turned the phone off again. I had made a decision up there in the cold quiet of the mountains. I wasn't letting her spin the narrative anymore. She left. She said not to look for her. That wasn't just a goodbye. That was a directive. The next morning, I put on the suit she used to say made me look too serious. A tailored navy three-piece that I hadn't worn since a client's retirement party last year. I shaved, tied a real tie, polished my shoes until they caught the light. Looking in the mirror, I didn't see a man clinging to the ruins. I saw the builder, the one who wasn't afraid of structure. I didn't smile, but I didn't need to. Clarity doesn't require a grin. I stepped into Miles Chen's office at 10 a.m. sharp. He stood up from behind a desk made of dark wood and focus, shook my hand, and gave me that curt nod he reserved for wartime strategies. You ready? He asked. I was. She was already outside. I saw her through the frosted glass of the waiting room, pacing, clutching a phone, wearing some oversized sweater and yesterday's mascara. Her hair was knotted up, messy in a way that used to be charming, but now just looked like regret trying to dress itself as humility. When I stepped through the door, her eyes locked on mine like magnets she hadn't realized still worked. Grayson, she said, and her voice cracked in that performative way I used to fall for. What is this? What are you doing? I kept my face calm. Miles stood just behind me like a silent wall. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give her tears the oxygen they needed. You left a note, I said evenly. I'm just following directions. She blinked like that hurt. Like the truth was some slap she didn't expect. You froze the accounts. I cut her off with a look. Not anger. Just clarity. You said not to look for you. That includes not funding your escape. Her bottom lip trembled. I remembered how she used to weaponize that look. How many arguments she'd ended with a soft cry and a collapsed frame, and how often I'd been the one reaching across to catch her before she fell. I didn't reach this time. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. Then maybe you shouldn't have planned it. Her eyes widened. That landed. A flash of guilt, of fear. I knew then she didn't think I'd find out about Jordan. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She thought the distance and time would dull the betrayal. She was wrong. Grayson, we can talk about this. She tried again, softer now. I stepped past her. Miles opened the door to the conference room without a word. Wait, she said, louder. You can't just walk away from me like this. But I already had. Days ago. On a trail winding through silence, in boots that carried me higher than she ever cared to understand. In the meeting, Miles laid it out like a surgeon drawing the first line with a scalpel. No flair. No theatrics. Just timelines, facts, assets, and her handwritten confession. She'd left the note. She'd vacated the home. She'd engaged in an affair. No judge with half a brain would call this mutual. After we finished, I walked out without saying another word to her. She was still in the hallway, this time sitting, shoulders hunched, phone in her lap like a dead weight. She looked up, eyes glassy. Do you hate me? I paused. That was the first honest question she'd asked in months. No, I said, but I don't believe in you anymore. And I won't fund the fiction. I left her there, surrounded by the quiet that used to terrify her. I got in my car, exhaled slowly, and for the first time since she walked out, I felt something close to peace. The suit didn't itch. The silence didn't hurt. And the man I saw in the rearview mirror didn't look broken anymore. He looked prepared. Let her send 1,000 more messages. I wouldn't be reading them. 6 months after Delilah smiled through my firing, I sat in a glass-walled office overlooking the same skyline I once stared at with my face pressed against the glass, thinking I had to beg my way in. Funny how time folds in on itself, how power shifts without needing to make a sound. It was a Thursday, mid-autumn. The city looked carved out of gold leaf. Amber light bouncing off glass towers, trees flaring red at their tips, wind pushing leaves in little circles across the pavement. My view had changed, but not just physically. Something in me had shifted. I no longer looked out with longing or hunger. I looked with ownership. Peaceful, deliberate ownership. The world outside didn't know the details. Most people didn't need to. They just knew Brantley Holdings had restructured, and that Monarch Venture Group had exploded onto the logistics scene with speed and clarity no one expected. What they didn't know was that the explosion had a trigger, and that Delilah herself had pulled it. I didn't parade it. No interviews. No exposés. No tell-all LinkedIn posts laced with smug metaphors about growth and betrayal. I let the silence carry my victory forward. I let the results speak, because they always do louder than vengeance ever could. People think justice is loud. But the truth? It's quiet. It's in the way certain names disappear from rosters. It's in the way calls stop going to the person who thought they were untouchable. It's in the transfer of power disguised as a routine contract adjustment. Justice moves through paperwork, through vendor shifts, through forgotten access passes and meetings rescheduled indefinitely. Delilah hadn't spoken to me since the board deal. Her name came up only when necessary performance updates, PR briefings, a missed event she was once expected to host. She stayed out of the spotlight now. I think she thought I'd come after her publicly, and when I didn't, the silence became heavier than anything I could have said. Sierra called sometimes. Not often. Enough. Enough to remind me that we'd shared more than just a name on legal documents. But those calls were always short. There was nothing left to beg from each other. She knew I had no intention of returning to the old rhythm of our marriage. The one where I ran myself into the ground trying to earn love disguised as approval. That version of me didn't exist anymore. When we did speak, it was about her father. He was quiet now too. His public speeches had become fewer. His articles, once monthly, had tapered off. But when he did make a statement, he made sure to mention Monarch Venture Group by name. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. Because pretending we weren't the reason Brantley was still afloat would have been a lie even he couldn't spin. Roman was a ghost now. I hadn't heard a whisper since he vanished. There were rumors. Some said he tried launching a tech platform. Others said he was consulting abroad. But the truth? I didn't care. He was never the threat. He was just the match. The real fire had always been Delilah's belief that charm could replace competence. My office had no plaques. No family portraits or framed first-dollar bills. I didn't need monuments to remind me of what I'd done. I kept it minimalist, sharp black desk, matte white walls, and a single, subtle painting across from my seat. A storm clearing over a field. No people, just movement. That was enough. Jordan knocked once and entered, tablet in hand. 2 things, he said, already grinning like a man who knew I'd like both. I looked up, gesturing for him to continue. 1. Brantley just approved their renewal with us. 5-year term. Up their retainer by 11%. No edits to the equity clause. I let that one settle in. They didn't ask for a renegotiation? Nope, Jordan said. They paid early, actually. Of course they did. The board had learned their lesson, slowly, painfully, and in expensive installments. And 2. He flipped the tablet around. Westline Industries. They want to merge. I blinked. Merge. Not acquisition. Merge. 50-50 offer, but they're asking us to lead operations. They're offering equity leverage and access to their entire European pipeline. I leaned back in my chair, processing. Westline was one of the few legacy firms left that hadn't tried to pivot through PR stunts or digital gimmicks. They ran tight ships, built quietly, held contracts others only dreamed of. The fact that they were reaching out now told me one thing. The tide had turned. I nodded slowly. Set a meeting for next week. Jordan paused before he left. You ever think about it? He asked. About what? Where you were this time last year. Fired. Cornered. Alone. Now this. I stared out the window again. The skyline hadn't moved, but I had. I think about it every day, I said. But not with bitterness. Just clarity. He nodded and left the room. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to. Because I could. I pulled up the original documents from the Monarch and Corporation 6 years ago now. A scanned copy of the certificate of registration. My name etched into it. Not shared. Not borrowed. Mine. That was the thing no one understood. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't even chasing redemption. I was chasing peace. The kind that comes only when you stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to hear you. And I found it. Brantley wasn't the prize. It never was. It was the arena where I learned what I was worth. The real prize was owning my own time, my own name, my own decisions, and most of all, owning the quiet. There's something liberating about not needing to be loud. When Monarch hit its first milestone, $10 million in retained earnings, I didn't throw a party. I took the day off and sat at a small pier near the lake where Sierra and I used to walk. Alone. Just me and the sound of the water. No speeches. No headlines. When Delilah was officially removed from all decision-making roles, I didn't pop champagne. I took a deep breath and moved to the next task. Because progress is quieter than revenge. And far more permanent. They say time heals. But I don't think time does anything on its own. What heals is perspective. The realization that not everyone is meant to understand you. That sometimes you have to let people walk away with their version of the story while you go live yours. I didn't fix Brantley to prove a point. I let it collapse. Then I built something better. And now, every deal, every meeting, every signature, it's mine to choose. Mine to shape. I scrolled through my calendar. Tomorrow was light, an investor lunch, a compliance review, and a site visit to our new tech hub. Then the weekend. Clean. Open. Mine. The skyline shimmered in the dark, lights blinking like signals from a past life. 6 months ago, I was the man they fired with a smile. Now I'm the man they can't do business without. Tomorrow already happened. And it belonged to me. It started with a ping. One small, almost meaningless sound as I powered up the old desktop we used to share, Tessa and I. It hadn't been touched in weeks. The thing still booted up with that familiar hum, the whir of the fan like a breath being held. I sat there in the glow of the monitor, not even sure what I was looking for. Maybe I needed to confirm what I already knew. Maybe I needed the insult spelled out in high resolution. But when the screen lit up, and her name was still saved in the user profile, it felt like she was mocking me again. As if she never planned to truly leave, just rearranged the pieces so I could quietly carry the mess she made. I logged in using the same password I'd created 5 years ago. Her birthday. Ironic. I'd forgotten to change it because, honestly, I hadn't thought I'd need to. I should have. But my oversight turned out to be her mistake. The browser loaded automatically, tabs frozen in time. A shopping cart filled with designer sunglasses. A Pinterest board titled New Vibe, New Life. A half-written email to someone named JL. The initials stopped me cold. But not for long. I clicked the History tab. I wasn't expecting to feel anything. I'd already passed anger. Grief had done its laps. But there's something about seeing it all laid out in sequence. Undeniable, time-stamped. That feels like watching someone drive nails into your chest, slow and rhythmic. Hotel bookings, dinner reservations, spa treatments for 2 in Napa, repeated searches for how to leave your H. Then came the Instagram DMs. She never deleted anything. Not the flirty heart emojis. Not the midnight confessions. Not even the mockery. There it was clear as day, her and Jordan, talking about me like I was a phase she'd finally grown out of. He still makes those sad little dinners, she wrote once. It's like he's auditioning for a life I never wanted. He replied, can't wait to get you out of there. But he won't even see it coming. I stopped reading. Not because I couldn't stomach it, but because I didn't need more. I had enough. Enough proof. Enough cruelty. Enough to close the chapter without second-guessing the punctuation. I took screenshots of everything. Click, click, click. Folder by folder, I cataloged their betrayal. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. In this world, truth without documentation is just noise. I labeled the folder Archive, zipped it, encrypted it, and backed it up to 2 separate drives. One for me, one for Miles. I wasn't going to confront her with it. That would be too generous. No, I would let her wonder what I knew. Let her smile in some future courtroom, thinking she held the upper hand, only to watch her expression collapse when we opened the file. After I'd saved everything, I sat back in the chair, the same creaky swivel chair she used to complain about, and stared at the empty text field of a document. I didn't even know why I opened it. Maybe to write down how I felt. Maybe just to fill the silence with something other than the hum of betrayal. But nothing came. No poetic reflection. No righteous fury. Just the slow, icy crawl of finality settling into my bones. I closed the file without writing a word. That night, I slept better than I had in months. It wasn't peace. Not quite. But it was clarity. A strange sort of stillness that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to be who they pretended to be. I didn't dream of her. I didn't replay old fights or try to make sense of her decisions. Instead, I slept like a man who had nothing left to bargain with. No illusion left to keep warm. When I woke up, the sun was bleeding across the ceiling in thin amber strips. I made coffee. Not for 2. Just 1. I didn't set the table. I didn't scroll through my phone waiting for another message. I didn't care if she texted, or cried, or crafted some elaborate excuse with tearful punctuation. I had the archive. I had the silence. And I had the calm that comes after the storm has named every damage and moved on. Later that afternoon, I called Miles. "I have something for you," I said. "A package." His voice sharpened. "Evidence?" "More than that," I replied. "It's context." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. "Send it over. I'll make sure it's safe." I uploaded the folder and wrote a simple subject line in the email, her blueprint. Because that's what it was. She had been planning it for months, layering deception like foundation. Booking escapes while I folded laundry. Laughing into a phone while I massaged her aching feet after work. Leaving breadcrumb texts for a man who didn't know the first thing about building something worth keeping. And the final step in her blueprint? The note. 4 sentences. Written like a mic drop. But what she hadn't counted on, what she would never understand, is that I don't operate in mess. I operate in architecture. And architects remember where the rot begins. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my parents. Not my closest friends. Because I didn't want sympathy. I wanted silence. I wanted the satisfaction of knowing the next time she tried to claim something in court, money, property, pride, she'd be met with a digital dossier of her own undoing. That evening, I went back to the desktop. Not to review more evidence, but to clean. I cleared the history, wiped the drive, reset the entire system. I wasn't holding on anymore. I'd saved what I needed. The rest? It belonged to the past. Let her and Jordan keep their secrets, if they still had any left to keep. Before I shut down the computer for good, I opened a new document. Just 1 sentence this time. I typed it slowly, carefully. "You tried to burn down a house I built, but I know how to rebuild from ash." Then I closed the file. Didn't save it. Didn't need to. I already knew it by heart. The morning after I deleted the archive from the desktop, I called Mr. Ellison. He was an old-school landlord, the kind of man who didn't believe in emails and still did paperwork in triplicate. I'd known him for years, and he always respected 2 things, clarity and commitment. So I gave him both. I sent him a photo of Tessa's handwritten note, the one with her signature looped neatly at the bottom, anchored by the words, "Don't look for me." I followed it with a direct request. I'd like the lease in my name only. "She's vacated." There was a long pause on the other end. I pictured him sitting in his tiny office behind the florist shop he owned, rubbing his jaw like he always did when thinking. Then he said, "Understood. Come by and sign the new agreement this afternoon. Bring ID." I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. More like confirmed. Like something that should have happened months ago had finally caught up to where I stood. That apartment had been my home long before Tessa tried to reshape it into a showroom for her discontent. The art she bought but never hung. The half-used candles with names like Elderflower Seduction. The velvet pillows she insisted on even though they shed like animals. It was all an illusion, her attempt to polish chaos and call it domesticity. I arrived at Ellison's office just after 2. The lease was already waiting, stapled neatly, my name printed solo at the top. It looked right. Honest. I signed each page with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. By the time I walked out, the keys in my pocket felt heavier than they ever had before, not with burden, but with ownership. It was my door now, my space, my silence, and I intended to protect every inch of it. Not even an hour later, my phone rang. I didn't answer the first time, or the second, but by the third call, curiosity overrode discipline, and I picked up. Her voice hit my ear like static wrapped in fury. "You're locking me out?" she hissed, no preamble. "You're seriously locking me out of our place?" "No," I said calmly, pouring myself a glass of water. "You walked out. I just locked up." There was a sharp inhale on her end. Then silence. "You can't do that, Grayson. I live there too." "You also left a note," I said. "Legally and practically, you vacated." I confirmed it with the landlord. "The lease is in my name now." "You're being cruel." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I kept my tone measured. "Tessa, you wanted freedom. I'm giving it to you, with structure. You don't get to waltz in and out of the life you burn like it's still yours to rearrange." Her voice cracked. "You didn't even talk to me first." I paused, setting my glass down gently. "You didn't talk to me when you started planning your escape. You left a letter instead of a conversation. I'm just responding in kind." She tried again, this time her voice softer, pleading. "We were both unhappy, Grayson. I just needed something different. But that apartment, it was ours." "No," I said. "It was mine. I paid the bills. I cooked the meals. I cleaned up after your disappointment. All you did was decorate and disappear." Her silence this time wasn't just stunned. It was realization. The slow, creeping awareness that she had overplayed her hand and now the table had been flipped. "Look," she said finally, "can we just talk? In person? Please." I stared out the window. A breeze stirred the trees, gentle and detached. "I don't think that would help either of us," I said. "This isn't a negotiation anymore. This is reality." She hung up without saying goodbye. I exhaled slowly and stood in the middle of the living room. The space already felt different. Not lighter exactly, but settled. I took inventory of everything that had changed in the last few weeks. Her photos? Gone. Her clothes? Cleared. Even the scent had shifted, replaced by something cleaner, sharper, more me. Later that night, I found the small box she'd left in the closet. A collection of mismatched jewelry, old birthday cards from her mother, a dried flower from a wedding we attended 3 years ago. I didn't open it. I didn't read a thing. I just taped it shut, wrote her name on top in black marker, and slid it into the hallway cabinet under the fire extinguisher. If she wanted it, she could request it through Miles. That's how things work now. No more middle-of-the-night calls. No more back and forths that ended in nothing but exhaustion. From this point forward, every interaction would be filtered through formality. The next day, I went to the hardware store. Bought new locks, thicker, smarter, reinforced. I installed them myself. Screwed in the bolts, rewired the keypad. I wanted every click and drill to be a declaration. You don't get to come back. Not even for closure. I also bought a can of paint, deep navy, and started patching over the marks she'd left behind. The little scuff by the hallway where her gym bag always hit. The chipped corner of the wall where she once threw a shoe in frustration. I painted over every ghost of her without hesitation. As I worked, music played from my phone. My playlist. Not our carefully curated, us, list full of compromises and soft indie voices. No, this was mine, loud, bass-heavy, defiant. I let it fill the space, bleed into every crevice that once echoed with her discontent. When I finished, I stood back and admired the wall. It looked good. Strong. Different. I hadn't realized how much of the apartment had been shaped to fit her mood swings, her aspirations, her aesthetic. Now, it was starting to look like me. Steady. Clean. Forward-facing. That evening, I called Miles and gave him an update. "She tried to get back in," I said. He sighed. "Expected. Let her lawyer reach out next time. You've done everything right." "Still feels final." "It is," he said. "And that's a good thing." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. After we hung up, I stood by the window again. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting warm glows onto empty sidewalks. I watched the quiet. Not because I was lonely, but because I was learning to appreciate what it meant to be alone and not lost. The lease was mine now. So was the silence. So was the peace that came with locking a door and knowing no one had the right to walk through it but me. I didn't make a single post. Not one. No cryptic quote, no selfie in the sunlight, no clever caption. I didn't air my hurt online like a wound hoping for sympathy. But Tessa and Jordan? They staged it like a grand reveal. A rebrand. Her first post was a photo of their clinking glasses, rose and crystal, at a rooftop bar I'd once taken her to for our anniversary. The caption read, "New beginnings, brighter days." He posted a video. Tessa in slow motion, laughing, a golden filter softening her face. "Can't believe I get to do life with this woman," he wrote. "Everything's finally real." They tagged each other. Tagged the bar. Tagged the feeling. What they didn't realize, what people like them never seem to realize, is that when you go public, you invite the crowd to watch. And the crowd remembers. Especially when the timeline doesn't make sense. At first, I ignored it. Let them perform. Let them bask in the filtered high of their soft launch betrayal. But then Nora Tran called. Nora, who had once been Tessa's boss at Ridge and More Media. A woman who did not suffer fools, certainly not romantic office drama, and most definitely not the kind that humiliated her brand in public. "I just wanted to let you know," she said, her tone crisp. "No one wants to work with them now. HR's drowning in complaints." Apparently, this love story started while they were both on project contracts. One of the interns filed a report, said she saw them making out in a client boardroom 3 weeks before Tessa left you. I sat back in my chair, letting the information settle like dust on a surface already clean. "I'm not surprised," I said. Nora hesitated, then added, "I respected her once, you know. Tessa had potential. But this is messy, unethical, and frankly stupid." "She left me a note," I replied. "For sentences and a house key. Guess that's the brand now." Nora exhaled hard. HR might not be able to do much. Contracts are tricky. But people are talking. Word spreading fast. "I haven't said a word," I said. "You don't have to," she said. Screenshots circulate. And people remember who keeps their head down. She thanked me for my time and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time afterward. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't vengeance. It was confirmation. The kind that comes when you realize you never had to throw a punch. You just had to get out of the way and let them trip over their own ego. Their next post came 2 days later. A blurry selfie on a beach. Jordan's hair slicked back, Tessa squinting into the sun. Caption, "Just vibes. No baggage." The comments were a mess. "Wait, weren't you married?" one asked. "This feels fast," said another. Someone named it Junian Spring posted, "Is this the same guy you called a self-absorbed mansplainer last year?" LOL. I didn't engage. Not a like, not a share, not a wink of acknowledgement. Let them flounder in the algorithm. Let them drown in the very attention they thought would save them. What I did do, quietly, methodically, was update my accounts. Removed our joint Spotify family plan. Unlinked our shared grocery delivery subscription. Changed the emergency contact on my insurance. Each update was a stitch in the fabric of detachment. Then came the rumors. Not to me directly, but they trickled in from mutual friends and former colleagues. Jordan's name had been taken off a collaborative research paper. Tessa's profile had disappeared from the company's site. And then, most poetic of all, the local networking group for creatives posted a new code of conduct on their Instagram stories: zero tolerance for relationships formed during contract overlap. The caption read, "Trust is the foundation. Integrity is non-negotiable." No names mentioned. But names didn't have to be. Everyone knew. The best part? I didn't do a thing. I hadn't leaked a single receipt, hadn't whispered a word in the wrong ear. All I did was live. Quietly. Honestly. And when people noticed the difference between her curated chaos and my calm exit, they formed their own conclusions. That week, I spent more time outside. I started running again. Nothing flashy, just steady laps around the neighborhood park. A few old neighbors stopped me to say hi. One, Mrs. Kellerman, even handed me a Tupperware of banana bread. "Glad to see you smiling again, Grayson," she said gently. "Some people don't deserve second chances, you know." I nodded, said thank you, and meant it. It felt strange, being seen in this new light. Not as the man whose wife had disappeared in the night, but as the one who hadn't crumbled when she did. I didn't tell anyone the full story. I didn't need to. People had eyes. And more importantly, people had intuition. Tessa and Jordan kept posting, kept smiling, kept spinning. But the comments started thinning. The likes dipped. The enthusiasm around their public performances faded. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't look good in the daylight. and no filter can soften the edges of a broken foundation. One afternoon, I saw Jordan at a cafe near downtown. He was sitting alone, tapping his phone like it owed him something. No sign of Tessa. No sign of confidence. He looked up, saw me through the window, and froze. I didn't break stride. Didn't wave. Just kept walking. He looked like a man waiting for applause that never came. Later that night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. Not for an occasion. Just because. I put on a record. Cooked a real meal. And as the scent of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen, I thought about the quiet power of letting people fall on their own swords. They thought going public would protect them. That visibility was a shield. But all it did was shine a spotlight on their carelessness. I toasted myself. Took a long sip. Let them perform. I'm not in the audience anymore. The voicemail came in around noon. I was in the middle of comparing quotes for a new bookshelf installation when the notification buzzed, and I saw her name again. Tessa. No emoji, no subject line, just her voice, high and falsely breezy, like she was trying to sound unbothered, but couldn't quite erase the edge. Hey, Grayson. Hope you're well. So, random question, do you remember the Tulum rental? The one with the plunge pool? They just returned the security deposit. It was $5,700. I think I'm owed my half, so, like, $2,850. Let me know how you want to handle that. Thanks. That was it. That was the message. No mention of the note she left. No apology. No acknowledgement of the collapse she'd orchestrated. Just a casual financial query, as if we were two former roommates tidying up the last of the loose ends. I sat back in my chair, letting the number echo in my head, $2,850. A precise figure. Not rounded. Not vague. She had calculated it, practiced it, and decided this was the hill to climb after everything. Not the ruined marriage. Not the public affair. Not the digital trail of betrayal. No, it was about her half of a security deposit from a vacation she'd already forfeited with her choices. I didn't reply. Not immediately. I just opened a blank note on my phone and typed one word, Jordan. Then I opened my email and searched for the attachment Miles had sent a week ago. A PDF, neatly labeled Jordan.pdf. Miles, being the meticulous bulldog of a lawyer that he was, had compiled every documented instance of the affair, messages, photos, the time-stamped dinner receipts during company hours, all corroborated by the contracts both of them had signed swearing off romantic involvement with fellow contractors. It wasn't a petty document. It was professional, surgical. It laid out motive, timeline, breach, and consequences. It was the kind of file that could get you fired in some industries and blacklisted in others. I hadn't used it yet. Hadn't needed to. But if Tessa wanted to chase decimal points, she needed to be reminded that I still held the entire decimal system in my back pocket. A few hours later, I got the email. Not from her, but from her bargain bin lawyer. I didn't even flinch when I saw the domain address, a Gmail account with an amateur footer. No firm logo, no legal watermark. Just plain text. Subject, outstanding personal reimbursement. Body, Dear Mr. Wells. My client, Ms. Tessa Morgan, has reached out regarding a pending financial matter, the reimbursement of her portion of a vacation security deposit amounting to $2,850. Kindly confirm receipt and whether you intend to remit said amount via direct deposit or other means. Warm regards. Clara Denton, legal advisor. I stared at the message and actually smiled. A real one. The kind that creeps in when absurdity folds in on itself. Without hesitation, I forwarded the email to Miles with a single line. I think it's time. He responded within minutes. Subject, Denton. Body, attached. Sending to them now. Let's see how warm her new advisor stays. And just like that, Jordan.pdf was released into the wild. Miles copied both Tessa and Ms. Denton on the reply. His tone was dry as desert air. Please find attached. Restitution for shared vacation costs. We will begin preparing an itemized counterclaim reflecting damages, loss of opportunity, and reputational harm as a result of their actions. Kindly advise. There were no emojis. No flair. Just the cold press of consequence. I didn't expect an immediate reply. But the silence that followed? That was golden. 3 days passed. No voicemail. No follow-up. Her lawyer never wrote back. And then, on the 4th day, Tessa's Instagram went dark. Posts gone. Comments limited. The new beginning she had once paraded proudly now hidden under the blanket of retreat. Jordan's page remained, but with every post suspiciously lacking her presence. Mutuals noticed. One even messaged me privately. Hey, not trying to pry, but did something happen? She nuked her page. I didn't respond. Some stories are better when left open-ended for others to fill in. That weekend, I got a call from Miles. She's backing off, he said. They've gone quiet. No more demands. No follow-up from Denton. I'm guessing Jordan.pdf hit harder than expected. Good, I replied, sipping my coffee. Let them sit in the echo. You want me to send anything further? No, I said. Let it die quietly. Let them wonder how loud it could have gotten. After we hung up, I went back to my Saturday like nothing had happened. Did laundry. Paid bills. Even bought that new bookshelf I'd been eyeing. Something about building shelves felt poetic. Solid. Intentional. A place for stories worth keeping. That evening, I pulled out an old travel photo from Tulum. Just me, standing in the surf, sunburned and squinting, but smiling, truly smiling. I tucked it into the back of the new bookshelf, behind a row of hardcovers. Not as a shrine. Not out of nostalgia. Just a quiet reminder that I was there, too. That I'd lived it honestly. Tessa may have seen that trip as another temporary escape. But for me, it had been an attempt. An offering. And now? Now it was just a memory. One I didn't owe anyone money for. I never got the $2,850 back. But I never had to pay it either. And the real value? It wasn't in the dollars. It was in the silence. The way it arrived after that final push, and how it stayed. Permanent. She wanted closure in numbers. I gave her a ledger of consequences. And as for Jordan, I never saw him again. But I like to think that somewhere, every time his email dings, he wonders if another file is coming. The day of the divorce hearing didn't look anything like the movies. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no tearful standoff in front of a sympathetic judge, no gasp-worthy confession that turned the tide. It was beige walls, gray carpet, and the faint hum of a malfunctioning fluorescent light in the corner. The waiting room chairs were stiff, designed for discomfort, and the silence between us was as loud as anything we'd ever yelled. Tessa sat 3 seats away, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white against her navy blouse. She hadn't dressed down. If anything, she looked like she was going to a job interview. Subtle makeup, pearls, the same black heels she used to wear when she presented at quarterly meetings. As if professionalism could erase betrayal. I wore a charcoal suit. No tie. Crisp, quiet, deliberate. It wasn't about looking sharp. It was about showing I wasn't there to play. I was there to finish something she started. Miles sat beside me, flipping through our file with the kind of calm that comes from knowing every possible outcome is already accounted for. He didn't speak unless I asked a question. That was his style. Let the silence carry weight, and let the facts do the talking. Across from us, Tessa's bargain lawyer, Clara Denton, the same one who sent that ridiculous $2,850 email, shuffled her papers like they might sprout wings and fly out of this mess. She was younger than I expected, early 30s maybe, with nervous energy and a cheap briefcase that squeaked when she moved it. Her eyes flicked to mine once, then quickly away. I didn't blame her. Representing someone like Tessa was like trying to wrap poison in tissue paper and hope the judge never looks too closely. When we were called in, I followed Miles through the short hallway into the hearing room. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and a clipped voice, didn't look like she had time for drama. Good. Neither did I. We sat. We listened. Tessa didn't make a speech. No trembling apologies. No appeals to our history. Just her lawyer reading prepared statements that sounded like a book report written in the dark. They tried to minimize her affair, of course, phrasing it as an emotional connection that later evolved. Miles didn't flinch. He didn't interrupt. He waited until it was our turn. When he rose, he opened the folder with a deliberate breath and began laying it out, methodically, unemotionally. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of a timeline that predates the separation. Communications, receipts, direct messages. Furthermore, we have evidence that Ms. Morgan vacated the residence by her own hand, specifically a handwritten note, which has been entered into the record. The judge nodded. No surprise. She'd read the file, probably more than once. Miles continued, outlining the abandonment, the infidelity, and the financial damages that followed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Truth, when presented with precision, doesn't shout. It cuts. Tessa didn't look at me. Not once. She kept her gaze fixed somewhere over the judge's shoulder, like she might find a portal out of this moment if she stared long enough. When Miles finished, the judge asked 2 questions. Basic, procedural. Then she leaned back, folded her hands, and delivered the ruling with the tone of someone reading weather conditions. Fault-based dissolution granted. Division of assets as proposed. No spousal support awarded to the respondent. Ownership of the property awarded to Mr. Wells, citing occupancy, documentation, and financial responsibility. She tapped her gavel once. That was it. No applause. No tears. Just a low breath from Clara Denton and the faintest sigh from Tessa's throat. We walked out without a word. Miles handed me a copy of the decree, stapled neatly. Clean and final, he said. This is the best outcome you could have hoped for. I nodded. She didn't even try. She knew better, he said, then added with a small shrug. Or she figured out she was never going to win with her story. Outside, the air was warm but not oppressive. Late afternoon sun filtered through the branches overhead, casting shadows across the courthouse steps. I paused at the bottom and looked back, not at the building, but at what it represented. The place where everything broke officially. Legally. Publicly. Tessa didn't follow us out right away. When she finally did, she stood near the edge of the sidewalk, shoulders slumped, arms crossed. She wasn't crying. But she looked like someone who had finally realized the cost of her own choices. For a moment, I wondered if she'd say something. Some last plea. A parting line. But she didn't. And I didn't offer one either. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just the absence of one. Miles walked ahead to his car. I stood there for another few seconds, letting the sun warm my skin. Letting the silence stretch. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was hollow in the cleanest way possible. Like someone who'd cleared a house of mold and could finally breathe again. On the drive home, I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I just rolled down the windows and let the wind carry away the last pieces of what used to be my marriage. When I reached the apartment, I unlocked the door, my door now, and stepped into a space that felt fully mine. No more shared drawers. No more duplicate toothbrushes. No more ghost of someone who promised forever but only meant until I'm bored. I took the divorce papers and placed them in the fireproof safe in the back of the closet. Not because I needed to revisit them, but because sometimes keeping proof isn't about remembering. It's about never being gaslit again. Later that evening, I made dinner, steak, asparagus, and roasted potatoes. The kind of meal she used to complain was too heavy for a weeknight. I ate it slowly, enjoyed every bite. Then I opened a bottle of bourbon, poured a glass, and sat on the balcony watching the world move on. There was no victory toast, no celebration playlist. Just a quiet man with a signed decree and a future no longer tethered to someone else's chaos. I didn't win. I survived. And in this case, that was enough. It was such a small thing. A notification, buried between calendar alerts and a reminder to pick up light bulbs. Your Spotify password has been changed. That was it. No fanfare. No digital fireworks. Just one quiet sentence that shouldn't have meant anything except it did. Because I hadn't changed it. For a second, I sat there staring at the screen, thumb hovering above the screen, trying to decide if it was worth reacting to. Maybe it was an error. Maybe the app glitched. But the truth pressed in fast, undeniable. Tessa was still using our family plan. Still sitting in the shadows of the digital life we built together. Still clinging to the things she never earned the right to keep. It wasn't about the music. It was about the tether. The invisible string that tied us across accounts and subscriptions and shared memories she'd long stopped cherishing. And somehow, she thought that was still hers to access. After all the noise, all the damage, she was still dancing on a playlist I created. I opened the app, scrolled to family settings. Her profile was right there, Tessa Morgan. Still listening. Recently played. Norah Jones, Florence and the Machine, some chillwave remix I'd introduced her to back when we still talked over dinner. It made my stomach tighten. She hadn't let go. Not really. And the worst part? I'd been the one allowing it. Letting her stay connected to my life in these tiny ways because I hadn't bothered to lock every door. But I was done with that now. I hovered over the Remove Member button. One click. That's all it took. The system prompted me with a question. Are you sure you want to remove this member from your family plan? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Confirm. Done. Her name disappeared instantly. Like it had never been there. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't lonely. It was clean. It hit me then how many threads like that still existed. Not just music. Amazon, Netflix, autofilled passwords saved in browsers, old logins, shared memories masquerading as digital conveniences. All of it anchored to a past I'd already chosen to outgrow. Removing her from Spotify wasn't just about music. It was about taking back every inch of my life she assumed would always be available. So I kept going. I opened every app we'd once shared and began the audit. Click. Remove. Reset. The wine club she never used but insisted we keep. The birthday calendar with her friends' dates. The backup email account where she saved photos just in case. One by one, I scrubbed her presence out of the systems like cleaning an old wound finally allowed to heal. It wasn't revenge. I didn't block her. Didn't send a smug message saying, "I hope you enjoy the silence." I didn't need to. The silence would speak for itself. Later that night, I lay in bed scrolling through a playlist called Sunday Rain, one I'd made years ago for lazy mornings. Most of it was still mine, but a few songs reminded me of her. I didn't delete them. I didn't skip past them either. I let them play. Let them echo through the apartment one final time, not as a tribute, but as a purge. Then I made a new playlist. I called it Clean Break. The first track? A piano instrumental. No lyrics. No names. Just music. And in that quiet, I realized something. Grief doesn't always come crashing down. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in push notifications and song skips. But healing? Healing is active. It's choice after choice. It's one click at a time. I set the phone down, turned off the light, and let the quiet wrap around me, not as a void, but as peace. She was gone. And now, even her echo was fading. The morning I decided to paint the kitchen, the sky outside was soft and gray, like it was holding back tears no one had earned. I opened the windows anyway. I wanted the smell of primer and fresh air to settle into the walls. The old eggshell white, the one Tessa swore by because it matched the vibe, made the whole place feel like a dentist waiting room, sterile, detached, and afraid of personality. I stared at it for 10 minutes, roller in hand, before cracking open the new can of paint. Deep moss green. Bold, grounded, and nothing like her. As the first coat went on, I thought of how many arguments we'd had in this very room. Little ones. Stupid ones. The wrong dish soap. The grocery list. Whether the overhead light was too harsh. It's funny how a space can absorb conflict like drywall absorbs humidity. But with every stroke, I took the space back. Not just physically, but emotionally. This kitchen no longer had to carry her size, her disinterest, her thinly veiled contempt disguised as lifestyle suggestions. I replaced the Scandinavian chair next. The one she imported from Copenhagen because some blogger said it made rooms feel curated. It never matched anything. It wasn't comfortable. It was expensive for the sake of being expensive. I listed it online, and it sold within an hour. The woman who bought it said it was iconic. I said nothing. Just helped her carry it down the stairs and smiled as her SUV pulled away with the last piece of Tessa's aesthetic pretending to belong in my life. Then I built the shelf. It wasn't fancy, just oak and steel, pieces I ordered online and assembled over 2 hours while jazz played in the background. But when it was done, solid, centered, and sharp-edged, I felt something settle in my chest. Not pride exactly, but affirmation. I didn't need imported furniture to feel at home. I didn't need curated corners. I just needed a space that made sense again, that held the weight of things that mattered to me. One by one, I filled it with books. Not ones we'd shared. Those were already boxed and donated, but the ones I had loved before her. A first edition of Siddhartha. My dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. The entire shelf of Vonnegut I'd tucked away years ago because she once said, "His work makes me feel nothing." I wanted to laugh now, thinking of that. How much of myself I'd trimmed down to make her more comfortable. How many books, songs, thoughts I'd buried because they didn't align with her energy. There were no more alignments now. No compromises. I hung frame photos next. Not of people, just images I'd taken myself. A forest trail from Oregon. A crumbling wall in Sicily. A candid of an old man feeding pigeons in Prague. I hadn't looked at those photos in years. Tessa always said they made the place feel lonely. But to me, they felt honest. Quietly alive. They reminded me that I'd had a life before her, and I was building one again after her. By sunset, the apartment felt different. Not finished, but mine. I stood in the middle of the living room with the window cracked, letting in the faint hum of city traffic below, and looked around. It wasn't just about what had changed, it was about what had finally left. There was no more scent of her lavender diffuser. No passive-aggressive throw pillows. No stack of unread wellness magazines. The space didn't ache with absence. It breathed. Fully. The house wasn't haunted anymore. It was tempting to say I had moved on, that I was over her. But that would be too clean. The truth is, there were still moments. Flashbacks that came uninvited. Like the way she used to lean against the counter with her coffee cup in the mornings. Or how she hummed when folding laundry, never quite on key. Or that quiet, distracted look in her eyes when she was already planning her next escape. Those memories didn't vanish. They just stopped holding power. I made tea and sat by the bookshelf, legs stretched out on the rug I picked without her input. I reached for one of the books, East of Eden, the copy my father gave me when I turned 17, and let the weight of it rest in my hands for a moment. The spine was worn. The pages yellowed at the edges. But it was still whole. Still beautiful. Still mine. And I realized, that's what I had become. Worn, maybe. Yellowed at the edges. But not broken. Not ruined. Just real. Sometimes I remembered the man I was the day I found her note. Standing in the kitchen, keys beside the words that shattered the foundation of our marriage. He was frozen. Stunned. Trying to find breath in a room that had none. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't chased. He just acted. Rationally. Methodically. Like a man who knew emotion could not fix what logic needed to contain. And I thank him for that. I truly do. He didn't send text after text asking for answers she wasn't brave enough to give. He didn't sit in the dark hoping she'd come back with regret in her eyes. He didn't try to rewrite the ending. He accepted it quietly. Firmly. Then he got to work. He called the lawyer. He froze the accounts. He packed her things with care but no sentiment. He booked the hiking trip she'd mocked. He listened to the mountain silence and remembered the sound of his own mind. He changed the locks, stood tall on his own porch, and didn't let betrayal through the threshold. He didn't become vindictive. He became deliberate. And me? I'm the result of all those decisions. The shelf, the paint, the room that breathes again. They're proof of who I became after her chaos stopped dictating my atmosphere. I don't miss her. That surprises people when they ask. The most are too polite to do so directly. They skirt the subject. It must be hard, they say. You two were together a long time. And they're right. It was long. Not in years, but in effort. In what I gave. In what I lost. But what they don't see is the relief. The quiet, steady joy of waking up in a place where nothing feels like eggshells. Where every item is intentional. Where the silence isn't hostile, it's restorative. I don't miss her. I miss who I had to be to survive her. And even that. I've outgrown. The home I built without her isn't a monument to what happened. It's a blueprint for what comes next. And whatever that may be, I'll walk into it with doors I locked myself, with walls I painted with hands that never trembled, and with a spine as unbent as the one I kept in court while she tried to explain the unexplainable. In the end, it wasn't revenge. It was resolution.